On it. Thanks.
Okay.
Welcome back to True Crime Broads. We are here with Rebecca Lopez from Channel 8 local WFAA News. Hey, Rebecca,
Hi.
thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. I know that you and Renee have already done a bit together in the past.
Yes, we did. Yeah,
that was
that's been a
years
couple
ago.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one of the reasons I wanted to have you on. I remember you telling us a story about how you had found out about the Missy Bevers case, and I thought we would have you on to tell that story.
Yes. So I am the crime and justice reporter here at WFAA. So I often have done a lot of stories involving police. And I had done a story on a woman a few years before whose son had been killed in a police chase there. And in front of the church where the crime happened, she happened to have a memorial for her son. And so she would often go visit that memorial for her son because that's the spot where he was killed. And she called and said, "Hey, I was just over visiting my son's memorial, and there's police activity at the church, and I went over there to see what was happening, and they're saying that there's a woman or a body inside the church, and they think it's a homicide." And that was early in the morning. I can't remember exactly. It had to have been around 8:30 that I got that call. So I drove out there. I drove out to Midlothian, and I was the only reporter there for hours as they were going in and out. We still didn't have any details. At one point, the family came out there, and we were trying to talk to them. I think later in the day, they did make a couple of statements, but that's honestly how I found out that something had happened inside that church.
Wow, that's amazing. So you were right there. You were the first reporter on the scene.
I was.
Was it pretty chaotic? You said you were there for hours. Was information coming in that made sense, or was it kind of chaotic and hard to understand at first?
It was, well, they were very, obviously, whenever you get to a crime scene, typically the police anywhere don't really talk about what's happening. And at that point, they were still processing the scene. And there weren't a lot of people out there. I mean, there were police officers, but we were like kept off on the side of the road. So I could see some of what was happening. But at that point, we couldn't see where the break-in had happened. We couldn't get to the window. We could only see some police activity. And then later on, they did the press conference and released that video that is now so infamous now. That's sorry about that. That's my phone going off. But yes, so then they released that video that was now so it's been out there in the public.
Right, the crazy surveillance video of that horrible perpetrator walking around before he killed Missy, apparently, or she.
And it depends on who you ask. That's always been a point of contention with people, whether or not it's a man or a woman. I mean, it was interesting because early on, we had some video of a person that we thought might be a person of interest. And we gave some of that video to Midlothian, and I do believe that they looked at the person, but I don't think they were ever able to link the person, but it was that the way the person was walking, and they happened to have also been at the service.
Yes, I know who you're talking about. Mm-hmm. He was kind of, I've seen that video. He was kind of sauntering around a lot like the perpetrator in the church, and he was working security at her memorial, which was another red flag, of course. Our understanding is he's no longer being looked at. So
that's correct. And it was interesting because the photographer that shot the video called me immediately, like, this video looks so interesting and you might want to take a look. And so we turned it over just like everybody else turned over to him. So yes, my understanding is it didn't go anywhere, but it was just such a bizarre story. Like I've covered many, many, many crimes and many homicides, countless in my 35 years as a police reporter, 25 in the DFW area. And I've never seen anything like that. Like for me, as a police reporter, typically when people break in to burglarize, they're not there to stick around, and they're certainly not dressed in weird clothing, like SWAT like gear. I mean, they go in, they grab whatever they're going to grab, and then they leave. They don't stick around. Like, I've never heard of another case. Even, I mean, I've heard now similar ones, but not somebody that is dressed in fatigues and going into a church and spending time in there or anywhere. It's just not typically done. And so that's why I to this day still feel like the person knew her.
Yes.
Right.
We agree.
Targeted. Yeah.
That would just be too weird if that person was just dancing around there all that time for no reason.
And churches don't typically keep a lot of money at the church, you know, so it's not like they were there to see if they could get into the coffers or whatever, or because typically churches don't keep their money around like that. You know, and I know even the church that I go to, they take the money and then they, you know, go put it in a secure location, or immediately make, you know, deposits. And so it was just kind of weird to me that there was somebody just walking around in that church for so long, and really not much was taken.
We agree.
I don't think anything was taken. They never took anything.
Nothing. And we agree with you. It does look like someone just sort of waiting for someone, just killing time.
They're just kind of killing time and trying to make it look like a burglary or whatever, you know, like they're attempting to do things, but you can tell they're not really. I mean, I could have put better effort into that when they were trying to get in that one door.
And they're hiding the identity. And it's almost like they kind of knew because remember the cameras weren't working in certain parts or outside the church, where they couldn't even get like how the person got in there, what kind of vehicle. I do remember early on there was a vehicle that they were looking at that had been parked down the road. And we spent a lot of time looking into that ourselves and going through all our footage that we had, and we really couldn't, you know, come to any conclusion either.
Was that the Nissan
the
Altima?
white? It was a white. I think it was a white car.
That was at the SWFA parking lot.
Okay, that was it.
Yeah. We've actually recorded an episode not long ago with some people that believe they know who the Altima belongs to. So
that's very interesting. And I know that I've obviously interviewed the police chief down there a couple of times. I interviewed him as part of our anniversary special that we did on that. And, you know, they obviously really, really want to, you know, catch who did this. And I feel like, you know, he's been there for a long time. And I feel like he doesn't want to retire until he does that, until this crime is solved. And I will say this, I mean, a lot of times what happens in homicides, especially something that's so high profile, is there are so many tips. And so it bogs down the investigation, even though it's great that people are calling in, but then you get all these other, you know, crazy tips that you've got to go and make, and that takes FBI agents and all the people that were down there, and it just wastes a lot of time. And then who knows? I mean, I've heard many cases in the past where the person's right there, they're in their files, but because they're going through so many files and cases, it could be buried there. They probably have already, I think they've probably already talked to the person that did it. They just have not been able to, you know, prove it at this point.
Right. Yeah, we think that too.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. It's such a crazy case. And I don't ever want to forget it. I do remember the anniversary every year because I think that it's important to her family and friends that this is solved. It's just so frustrating because there's no DNA evidence. There's no physical evidence that was left behind. I mean, the person covered their tracks. They're just guys. I mean, short of that person telling someone, I feel it's gonna be a very difficult case to solve.
Yeah, it seemed like they knew what they were doing, just, you know, as far as not leaving traces behind. And that's just really unfortunate. We did see a press release years ago by Kevin Johnson. Of course, he's no longer with MPD. Yeah, I'm sure you know him. Yeah. He had said in an article once that they did have some DNA, but it was partial and mixed. So I'm wondering if maybe hopefully someday that DNA technology always improves. You hear about cases getting solved. Hopefully that'll happen in this case. Gosh, it's been almost 7 years. So maybe we're not far from an improvement that would allow that DNA to be useful. I don't know.
Well, yeah, there's another case like that where they have a very, very minute sample, and that's the Amber Hagerman case, the Amber Alert little girl that they have a very small trace of her DNA, but if the sample is so small that if you use it now and you don't get anything, then it's gone. So I think so it's just so minute. So they have to wait until the DNA technology gets better, and that's what they're hoping, that there's more improvements so that something like that is a for sure thing. But, sometimes you only have a little bit, and if you only use that sample, it's gone,
Wow.
So looks like they would take that opportunity to upload it, or I would say upload it, but put it in one of those databases like the Ancestry or something. So that way something would pop up eventually to match to it.
Yeah. And I think that's the problem, though. I think that if you can't even put because if you use the sample to upload it or use it in any kind of testing, it's it, and it's gone. So they have to just wait for that technology to get better. And that might be the case in the Missy Bevers case as well.
Right.
And of course, we went down all kinds of different paths of, and over the years, I've gone back and forth on, and I'm not going to give my opinion on who I think it is, but I've had my own theories over the years.
Why do you think that Midlothian Police does not do updates anymore? It seems like they haven't given a statement in years now.
Yeah, and I think that probably that's just the fault of the media. A lot of times everybody moves on to other cases and other stories, and there's something else happens. And honestly, it really takes diligence on the part of us to continue to ask questions. And I mean, when I asked them for an interview, they were more than happy to sit down and talk to us about their latest findings. And that was when we did the interview with you a couple years ago. But if I call up there, they are very open to answering my questions. So I just think it's just a matter of us in the media going back and asking them those questions. I don't think it's anything that they didn't want to hide or anything like that.
Oh, okay. That's good to hear. Yeah. Because I know the public, especially people in the immediate area. I don't live down there anymore, but Renee does. And I know that people that live right there in Midlothian are a little concerned about their own personal safety. I mean, if you really think about this, there's a homicidal maniac on the loose, and that bothers some people more than others. I think a lot of people have moved on, but I know personal friends who, they'll say when they're taking their trash cans out at night, they run back to their house because they get this creepy feeling that, there's that type of a person still running around.
Oh, yeah. I mean, anytime you have something like that unsolved, it definitely makes you, wonder if the person would do it again. But I feel like, again, that I feel like it was targeted. And the more that I've talked over the years to people that were close to the investigation, I feel like they also think it was targeted. So I don't really think that there is a danger to the people in Midlothian. I feel strongly that authorities think that she was in fact targeted. So
right, and it was personal.
It was not random.
Yeah.
Well, and then just like the way they covered their tracks and everything. Again, a person who is just there to steal money is not going to do that. They're just going to take whatever and leave. I mean, that's very typical. I know that they did look at a couple of other cases of church break-ins. I think there was one even here in Dallas, because I remember doing a story on that, and they went back and they looked to see if there were any similarities. And they really couldn't find anything that linked any other crimes to this one.
I remember watching one in particular that I found online where a guy had broken into a church, and he had I think he just had like a hoodie on, and he's just walking around, and you can clearly see his face, and you can tell that he's literally digging for something, like he's looking for valuables or money or whatever. So it was completely different. So I agree with you on that.
Yeah, it's almost like the fact that they went into different rooms and then opened the cabinets, and it just didn't make sense that somebody would be up at that hour of the morning, dressed like that, going in and walking around and then taking nothing. And the whole thing to me just, it just didn't make sense for it to be a random crime.
You know what's interesting is early on, Midlothian police, very early on, I mean, like 2016, they were releasing the search warrants pretty much in real time to the media. Yeah. I noticed that we pull the public records from time to time, and we noticed that the last several search warrants they have not publicized. Does WFAA, do you guys, when you're doing a case, are you pulling public records? Or are you just kind of taking the ones that the police give you?
No, we get our own public records, because the thing, so a court document, when it comes to search warrants or arrest affidavits, like an arrest affidavit, if you arrest somebody and put them in jail, that affidavit, you don't even have to file an open records. It's a court record, so it should be immediately returned back to the judge or the clerk in the jurisdiction, where not the police department. It goes back to the judge that signed it, and then it goes into the criminal clerk's office. And so we go and we get them immediately. They cannot withhold them. You don't have to file an open records. If they tell you do, then they need to read the state law. Same thing with search warrants. Now with search warrants, the warrant itself, that where there's the request, is a public record, and then the return of the search warrant, whatever they found in the house or the building or the car or whatever they were searching, the cell phone, whatever they were searching, that also is an immediate release. It's a court document that has to be released immediately. But the affidavit that says why they were looking for it, that details all of that, that does not necessarily have to be released. They can seal that portion according to state law, but they have to at least give you the front page of the warrant and whatever they took from whatever they found, the inventory, that has to be released always. And I mean, you could just go up to the courthouse and get it. If they tell you no, then you show them the state law, which is, part of the court of criminal procedure that they have to release.
Yeah, they've been pretty good about that. They usually email that stuff to us pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So yeah, they've been really nice about that over at MPD and the records department.
I didn't realize if there'd been any warrants recently. I haven't, that's a good
it's been a couple of years. Yeah, it's been about 2 years.
Yeah. Well, and I know that they traveled out of when I did my last interview with them, they did tell me that they had traveled out of state, and had traveled to several states, interviewing people and looking for potential suspects. So I know that, of course, then some of the witnesses have moved, and so sometimes they have to go back and re-interview those people. I mean, I feel like this case will be solved someday. I just don't know how long it's going to be, but I do think that I think it will be solved.
Yeah, so do we. Do you think that the FBI is still actively investigating this case?
I don't think so. I think that they came in, and usually what the FBI does is they come in with, especially with small or police departments or sheriff's departments that don't have the manpower for this size of case. They'll come in and they help, but then they pull out. And so I don't believe that they're actively involved anymore. It's strictly now back in
so you think it's pretty much MPD by themselves these days? Okay, gotcha.
Yes. Yeah, then I think they have that, and the case got turned over to a new detective a couple years ago, I believe. And that detective, sometimes it's good to put fresh eyes on it, because maybe somebody missed it. How many podcasts have we listened to over the years where someone says, we just put a new detective, and they went back through the files, and then they found that one little thing, little nugget that helped them solve this case. Yeah. So, but I continue, and every time that we put the story out, we also get people that call in, and some of them are just,
we get those too. Yeah.
I think we almost had to get a restraining order on this one person one time that was like just adamant.
That's so sad. And I'm not terribly surprised.
No, and and I know that they, that just takes away a lot from what the officers are trying to do, because then they have to deal with these, distractions that have nothing to do with the evidence or them trying to, catch the killer.
Yeah. And we'll get and it's a waste of time too for them when someone calls up and says, hey, I was in North Carolina recently, and I saw someone walking down the street just exactly like that. So there's your killer. I mean, the odds of that being the killer are slim to none. There's so many people that walk that way. I know what the police are hoping people will call in actual links, actual evidence, but people end up speculating like that. And I'm sure that's not what they're looking for.
I think in their last statement, they did make there was a sentence where they said that the person may not walk like that any longer. It may have been due to a temporary condition or what they were wearing, which kind of what I think, the boots were too big type thing. So
yeah, you're right. Their gait may not even be like that in daily life. That's true.
Because I think they were probably tired of getting those same continuous calls about, oh, my brother's cousin's neighbor, or whatever.
Yeah. And I do think it's important to note that, I mean, Midlothian PD and the FBI and all those that were working initially on this case did go through really great lengths to make sure that they got as much information as they could. I mean, remember, they brought in the people that took a look at measuring the height and how they thought how tall the person might be and how big the person might be and that kind of thing. And so I thought that was, really important. And then, of course, they zoomed in on the clothing because it really wasn't, I don't believe, real SWAT gear. It was something that was made to look like, but I even had people calling me saying, well, the way they tucked the pants into the legs seemed like they knew somebody with military background, because that's what military people and police do. They tuck some of them tuck their pant leg into the boot. So I mean, we even had people calling us and with stuff like that. But so police obviously have to check all that out, but they did go to great lengths to try to get as much information as they could from that video, as well as from the crime scene. So,
and I remember early on, they sent the video of the perpetrator walking around, that surveillance video, to Tarrant County. The DA's office apparently had just opened some new state-of-the-art facility there, and it would be fascinating to see the report that they came up with. But of course, that's not public. We tried to get it, and they declined. So
yeah. Well, some stuff, obviously they do have to, keep, and that's frustrating, I think, for all of us, because they do. I know that there are stuff that they have withheld from that scene that only the killer would know, and so it won't be released ever until it goes to trial, because then you hurt your case of actually catching the killer based on if you release all your evidence. So I do understand the importance of some of that, privacy. Now, also, a lot of these cases, somebody talks like. Yes. That person would have said something to, and until the person that they confided in or talked to comes forward, oftentimes I have seen cases that way, where they have a falling out or something happens, or they have a conscience and eventually they'll come forward, or maybe they didn't think it was important, the conversation that they had. But I do remember, I think the FBI also did a profile. They brought the people from Quantico to do a profile of who they thought this person might be. I don't remember all the details of what that was, but they did do that as well.
Right. Yeah. It seems like there's been a lot of effort put into this case. It's just such a strange one. Like you said, it's very bizarre. I find that also fascinating that you brought up the video of the person walking around outside her memorial, because we used to watch that video years ago and just say, wow, it looks like the person shooting this video thinks this is the person, because they would zero in on the feet, and they were and we used to talk about that a lot. So thanks for telling us that. That's interesting to know where it came from.
Right.
That was a topic of conversation for so long. As you probably know, there's tons of Facebook groups that are dedicated to the Missy Bevers investigation, and people talk about things, and that video got passed around a lot. So that's interesting. Thanks for telling us that.
There was a rumor that he had, I basically just, made it to where he could do the memorial service. He just happened to go to a church that I go to, the Avenue, and the Avenue has a phenomenal security team, which a lot of other churches don't have. So they offer their security team services to other surrounding churches. So they just said, we will allow, our security team to come over and be there for the memorial or whatever it was that y'all were having. I didn't get to go. But anyway, that was how it happened. And everybody was like, oh, he offered to do it. He must be the killer.
Yeah. Well, and it being at Creekside, because that was the community memorial that was at Creekside Church, not her actual funeral, which was at Cowboy Church. So the whole thing did look really suspicious.
It did.
But you know what? He ended up being like 6'2" or something. So, and the perpetrator apparently is a much shorter individual. So I think that was one of the main ways they were able to eliminate him.
I think I remember that. I agree. I think that's the reason that they eliminated. But the story, I mean, the case has just, fascinated so many people because it's so unusual and
it really is,
and scary. And she was there to, do her boot camp, and and then she's just killed.
Have you ever, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Have you ever been able to go inside the church?
I've never gone inside that church. No. Have you guys?
Yeah, we have.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I've never been in there to go back. I mean, we went initially. I spent in fact, I think at one point, they had me for about a month every day go to Midlothian and just sit outside the police department and wait for update and continue to interview people in the community, which is very unusual for a reporter to get that kind of time. But they literally put me in that community for quite some time, and so I got to know a lot of the people around there and her friends, but again, nothing really came of it. They eventually just disbanded the big group and and whittled it down to just a couple of investigators that are now working on it. But I still think that it's going to get solved at some point.
I do too. Yeah, we're hopeful and we think that it's going in the right direction. It's just like you said, it's slow, and we agree with you. This is a super scary case. It's just like straight out of a horror movie. She walks in and unsuspecting there's someone dressed up and you get killed. It's everyone's worst nightmare. And a woman being alone, walking into an empty building that's dark, and it was dark outside. It's just everything horrifying. And it really angers us to think about Misty's last moments and how terrified she must have been when she realized that person was there to do her harm.
Well, and then she probably, and she wasn't even supposed, remember, I think it was raining and they were going to be outside. So they moved it to the church the last minute. But I know that they did publicize that prior to, hey, if you want to come, we're moving the boot camp. But I guess she had a Facebook page, if I remember correctly, where she was updating that. But initially, I think that was supposed to be outdoors. So clearly somebody was waiting for the time. I feel like they were waiting for the right time.
And watching her social media.
And watching her social media, watching her. But horrible. Which, of course, you could go down a whole rabbit, hole of what happens, like what the motive would have been.
Right.
And of course, there's all kinds of speculation that I won't get into because I think some of it's unfair to the people that were targeted by, some of the Facebook groups and people that have their names smeared that didn't have anything to do with the
right.
Yeah, we hear that a lot. We know we've probably done episodes on people you're referring to.
We definitely try to keep it. We can't control all of that, but we have our own Facebook group where we try to keep things cool. But there's been a lot of people falsely accused, and you're exactly right. That's very concerning.
It just goes on forever.
Well, I think what happens is people following the case zero in on who their perpetrator is, and they won't get off of it.
And it was interesting because I was listening to a podcast the other day, and another crime podcast, and they had everybody in the community for like 20 years pointed the finger at one person, and this guy's life was just hell for 20 years. And then they figured out that they eventually got the DNA and it matched and came back to somebody completely different.
Oh gosh.
And the guy, even after the police said, hey, we found the guy and it's not him, and the community still thought that it was this guy.
They got it wrong. They got it wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's hard to, convince people sometimes if they have their mindset on something. But I think that's why it's important that they keep re-looking at this case and bringing in fresh eyes and fresh detectives to, continue to look, because it is easy to get bogged down onto maybe one particular suspect or one particular path. And so I think it is very smart of Midlothian to sometimes bring in new people to look at this case.
Right. And that's exactly why we chose to, we do cover other cases, but our, this case is our main case and has been for a long time. And that's the reason we do this. We know they can't talk about it every day. So we feel like we can do that. We can be the ones to talk about it, on a consistent basis, keep it out there where people are listening, hearing about it. And just hope that the right person will come along, because people through the years have came forward and said, okay, I want to say this, and I've never said it before, but, of course it hasn't materialized, but eventually I think it'll get to that point.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I agree. Well, I'm as 25 years this year at WFAA, and I'm, kind of getting there to the point where, not now, not anytime soon, in a few years, possibly retiring. But I really hope that before I retire, that this case is solved.
Oh, we do too. Yeah, that would be great. It'd be great for you to be able to cover that, of course, as well as, seeing it from one point to the other.
Yeah, there's another big case in Dallas that I've always said it has haunted my career. That I have really, it's a woman who was killed walking down the street in Dallas, and her husband was the family owned a popular restaurant here in Dallas, and then she was gunned down, and that case was never solved. And the family was very well, and it was just such a bizarre case because that one seemed targeted to me. It seemed like a hit. Right. And it has never been solved. And I always dig on that case as well on my own, and hope that someday, she gets justice as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on, Rebecca. We loved having you, and maybe we can have you on again sometime. Hopefully it'll be when this thing's solved.
Oh my gosh, I would love to be on
amazing.
That. Yes, I know. I hope
all right.
So.
Well, thank you so much, Rebecca. Please let us know if there's anything we can do. We're just out here sort of doing the amateur podcasting version. But yeah, we would love to talk to you again sometime, and please keep in touch.
Okay, I love it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye. All right. This thing ended. Here we go.